Hello, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Americas. Here's what's coming up in today's show. Feeling the burn. The race to the White House heats up with a surprise win for Sanders in Michigan. Plus, fighting Zika with fish. We look at one unusual way El Salvador is taking on the virus. And a family reunion with a difference. Two Colombian sisters separated by a volcano 30 years ago finally reunite. Well, it was another crazy week in the U.S. race to the White House. Democrat Bernie Sanders had a stunning upset victory in Michigan, and Republican Donald Trump just kept on winning. Take a look.
A shock defeat, but not enough to derail Hillary Clinton's campaign. The former U.S. Secretary of State lost out to Bernie Sanders in Michigan, despite leading in the polls. But a resounding victory in Mississippi over her rival keeps her on track for the Democratic presidential nomination.
I want to be the president, not for those who are already successful. They don't need me. I want to be the president for the struggling and the striving, for people who have a dream and who are looking for a way to achieve that dream.
Sanders' narrow Michigan victory not enough to overtake Clinton, who now has over half the delegates needed to clinch the Democratic nomination. Across the aisle, Donald Trump's campaign continues to go from strength to strength. The brash businessman clinched wins in 3 more states: Mississippi, Michigan and Hawaii.
We have something going that's so good. We should grab each other and we should unify the party, and nobody's going to beat us, okay?
Trump's closest Republican competitor, Ted Cruz, won in Idaho, but Marco Rubio continues to slip, finishing a distant 4th in 3 states. Trump's race is continuing to divide the Republican Party. Former presidential candidate Mitt Romney, the latest to lead the charge against him. One man who won't be mounting a challenge is former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Despite being touted as a potential late alternative for the party, the billionaire said he feared it could ultimately benefit Trump's campaign.
In the midst of all the presidential campaigning this week, America saw the loss of formidable former First Lady Nancy Reagan. She died Sunday, aged 94. Nancy Reagan was the fiercely protective wife of the late conservative icon Ronald Reagan, a 2-term president in the 80s. Nancy, a former actor like her husband, was famous for her Just Say No campaign against drugs. She was also a tireless advocate for research into Alzheimer's, a disease suffered by her husband. Now, Brazil's former president is facing allegations of taking bribes and laundering money in the country's largest ever corruption scandal. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva denies any wrongdoing and has not been charged. But the shockwaves from the scandal are fueling calls for the impeachment of his successor, President Dilma Rousseff. Josh Vardy has the details.
Unprecedented treatment of a former Brazilian president. When Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's apartment was searched by police, it sent shockwaves through Brazilian society. Then the former president, who still enjoys widespread popularity in Brazil, was taken for interrogation at the airport.
Former presidents have never been treated like this. Lula could easily have been interviewed at home or invited to make a statement to the police. I think the federal police, the prosecutor and Moro the judge meant for it to be a spectacle.
A spectacle launched by authorities to show that nobody's above the law in Brazil. Lula's now accused of taking more than 7 million euros worth of kickbacks, money that helped him buy this 3-story apartment in Guajira, alongside countless gifts and other payments from conferences paid by Petrobras. Lula denies the corruption charges.
If the police, public prosecutor or anyone else finds a single piece of evidence which puts my conduct into question, then I don't deserve to be in the party.
The Petrobras system started in 1997. The state oil company would launch tenders to around 30 construction companies who would bid for each building site, then overcharge the work. The surplus went to employees and certain officials in exchange for their support in government. Around 10 billion euros were misappropriated, roughly 150 million euros of which went to the pockets of Lula's Workers' Party. Among those implicated was João Vacari Neto, the party treasurer, but also dozens of officials like Eduardo Cunha, the president of the assembly, and even President Dilma Rousseff herself.
O Brasil está passando Brazil is going through a difficult time. This difficult period is in part due to the political crisis provoked by those who can't accept losing the elections and who are working towards the 2018 elections.
The case has shaken Brazil's political class to its core. It's easy to forget its humble beginnings in 2014 when Judge Sergio Moro led an inquiry into money laundering involving the owner of a petrol station. The case is now known in Brazil as Lava Jato, or the Express Wash. By December last year, 15 convictions have been given out, with 58 people sentenced to a total of 700 years in prison.
We'll focus now on the Zika virus in El Salvador. Zika is carried by mosquitoes and has been linked to birth defects. As a result, the health ministry is telling women there not to get pregnant until 2018. Yet El Salvador is one of the most repressive countries in the world regarding abortion and birth control. Instead, it's now focusing its efforts on destroying the mosquitoes that carry the disease.
Getting hold of contraceptives in the pharmacies of El Salvador is a tricky business, as this attempt proves.
Condones.
No vendemos eso.
No hay nada de condones aquí?
No.
¿En ninguna de las San Nicolás? ¿Pero por qué? O sea, ¿qué?
Política de la empresa.
¿Y cómo lo justifica la empresa?
¿Ya le voy a regalar una información?
Sí.
The leaflet's message: protect yourself with the only solution. Be faithful to your family for life. Despite the fears of the effects of Zika on infants, religion rules here. In a country where 60% of pregnancies are unwanted, abortion remains illegal and carries a potential prison sentence of up to 12 years. The United Nations has said it wants a temporary change in the rules, but for now that's a recommendation which has fallen on deaf ears at the Health Ministry.
Bueno, nosotros hemos ahorita respondido como Ministerio de Salud y como Sistema
We have
Nacional de
answered as the Health Ministry and as the National Health System by equipping and distributing methods of family planning in all the establishments of the system.
Will you authorise abortion temporarily?
That is not a decision that is within my frame of knowledge.
Instead, authorities are relying on fumigation to tackle the Zika virus at its source. The Aedes aegypti mosquito that also acts as a vector for dengue fever and chikungunya. And now the government's turned its attention to another, more natural method of eradication discovered in a small village on the Pacific coast. Thanks to these tiny fish called sambos, there hasn't been a single case of Zika here. In El Salvador, water's often stored outside, in open-air tanks. And Marielos realised the creature's potential when passing by an abandoned swimming pool.
We saw the pool was full, and when we looked closer, we noticed there were no larvae. We thought, that's odd, rainwater and no larvae. Then we saw the fish come up to the surface, and we said, this is the solution for San Diego.
Now Marielos has set free her little protégés in some 300 homes. Just one method of tackling an illness with many unknown impacts on human health.
All right, we'll leave you now with this incredible story out of Colombia. Two sisters have been reunited after spending over 30 years apart. Jacqueline Sanchez and Lorena Santos were separated, aged just 3 and 9 years old, after a mudslide caused by a volcano tore through their hometown. Mark Thompson has the details.
They thought they'd lost each other forever. After 30 years apart, Jacqueline Sanchez and Lorena Santos are reunited once again. The two sisters were adopted by separate families after a mudslide tore through their hometown when they were children.
I'm still trying to make sense of this situation in my head, because it's not easy after 30 years to be told that you have a sister.
Late in the evening, on November 13th, 1985, the Nevado del Ruiz volcano erupted. Many residents in Armero, 11 kilometers away, were caught by surprise, having been reassured by local officials. By the time word reached the town, it was too late for many to react. Most of the 25,000-strong population were killed in the mudslides which followed. Lorena returned to her hometown 3 years ago, hoping to find more information about her parents, whose bodies were never recovered. Like hundreds of other former residents, she submitted her DNA for tests. An association set up to help support victims of the tragedy also recorded a video message which was shared on Facebook, a clip which was seen by her elder sister.
I looked at her. Every day I watched the video, and every time I said to myself, yes, she's my sister.
The pair were only 3 and 9 years old, respectively, when the tragedy took place. Many more families are hoping their story is just the start. Almost 300 other people have posted messages in the hope of finding missing relatives. 3 decades on, Jacqueline and Lorena are so far the only family members to have been reunited.
Well, that's all the time we have for this Inside the Americas. We'll see you next week for all the news from north to south.